Committee meeting to order. The first standing committee that will meet is the policy committee. Ms. Bullock. Do you have anybody online?
No, ma'am. I don't have anything online.
Okay. No worries. We will come back to the policy committee. We'll move forward with the administrative services and operations committee. Mr. Sharp.
Well, I'm fortunate to say we do have a quorum, so we
good
can carry
for
on.
you.
Thank you very much. Good day. Happy New Year's, everybody.
Happy New Year.
I'd like to call to order the Administrative Service and Operations Committee meeting to order. A roll call, please. Bill Sharp here, Lank, Donovan Tavis, Franklin Lamb, Sharonda Bullock. I don't have a quorum. I'm sorry, I thought somebody was already. We can go home. Yeah.
All right, 1 second, moving right along. We will see if student services does. 1 second here.
Nobody is.
Student services does have a quorum, so if you don't mind, Mr. Edwards, we'll proceed with student services.
I do.
All right, thank you.
Who have I got? Me,
Myself, Evelyn, and you.
you. Okay. All right.
3 out of 5.
3 out of 5. Well, cool. All right, so we'll call this thing to order. How are y'all tonight?
Good.
Click on everything. So, with us having a quorum, I need to ask for approval of the meeting minutes from our last meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If no discussion, those are approved. By the sign of aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Very good. And so just in time for his information, I'll call Michael Byer up. Just as he's walking in.
You just barely.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Sorry about that. All right, so share with you some transportation updates for the month of December. So December 4th through the 8th, we had a DMV trainer to train 2 drivers, both passed behind the wheel. DMV will continue training drivers behind the wheel after the 1st of this year in January. He's doing the drivers that need the training before their permit runs out first. Transportation hired in the month of December. We had a youth apprenticeship from the CTE program and a part-time fueler that we hired. All right. So student ridership. So this year we started out with 7,571 students. We've done a TD2 report that showed we had actually 5,700 students riding, a little bit over 5,700. Per Dr. Ellis's request, we wanted to do another student count. So we had the APs identify 810 students to show that they were not on the bus or other transportation from the school. So transportation removed these students from Power School and Bus Planner. Transportation is going a little further by running a 28-day report from Bus Planner. But Bus Planner is our routing program that we use to compare when the bus stops at each stop. So the GPS accordance, if the bus doesn't stop at this student's address for 28 days, we're going to start removing these students as well. I identified there was over 900 more students that we could potentially remove from the buses. And we're gonna start working on that. Once we identify these students, we're gonna have meetings with the APs. I don't wanna remove anything without the knowledge of the schools, but we're gonna get up with the APs and start removing these students as well. Another thing that's coming up is this E-rate funding for bus Wi-Fi incentives. The FCC passed a Learn Without Limits initiative locating means of E-rate dollars to add Wi-Fi to school buses. I know we talked about this in the spring, and it's just coming to us now. This is a major step forward in providing the quantity and access for students across the nation. So you're going to hear more about this in the future. I had my first meeting right before Christmas break. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions? Mr. Sharp?
Yes, sir, thank you, Mr.
Mhm.
Chair. Could you elaborate that, you're saying Wi-Fi on the school buses for designated school buses for,
No, all school buses.
so why would you want to put Wi-Fi on all school buses when kids already have an issue with phone and phone uses on the bus?
So they're thinking about, and this initiative started with 2 students. Two students were in athletics. I don't know what athletics, I think it was football, but they didn't have time to do their homework at home because there were after school, by the time they got home from practice, it was late. So they were fighting about they didn't have the time to do their homework because they were driving an hour on the bus in the morning and an hour on the bus in the afternoon, and it passed. 2 students actually fought for it, and it passed through the FCC to provide Wi-Fi for buses. But it's going to be managed just like the Wi-Fi in schools as well.
So we have bus issues already with students on the bus.
Mm-hmm.
You want to open up an opportunity, a window for add to that issue with adding Wi-Fi to the buses.
Mm-hmm. It hasn't gone through yet.
We didn't pass this, Mr. Shaw.
We didn't
What I'm
pass
saying
it.
is, it's up to individual district to determine whether they want to do that, correct?
Correct.
Problem.
And it's costly too.
But remember, we did this during COVID. We had the Wi-Fi buses parked at certain places.
But it was parking, just for expansion.
But they had
in-
Wi-Fi access,
Yeah,
so
that's
it's all
right.
about students that didn't have internet at the house. And
Right.
I'm
That's
assuming
what-
they're saying that kids not doing homework, they can't do it. We got some kids, I think from the early college, they go for about an hour a day
Mhm.
going back and forth, so they would have access to that. I mean, I'm sure there'd be issues, but that'd be something we need to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to look into that as far as,
Mhm.
you know what you got now with the school bus and the issue with transportation. So that might be a distraction for a bus driver.
Mm-hmm. Or it could help the bus driver because everybody would be on there
Doing homework.
doing homework.
Come on.
I know, right?
Ms. Allen?
I have a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, Mr. Shaw, but I disagree with you.
That's okay. We can agree to disagree, as long as you know I'm right.
You are not right on this one.
Okay.
Because I see this as a very good, positive thing, because we've got so many kids, whether they're in this district or other districts, even around the country, who don't have access to Wi-Fi. And they only have it if they're in school. So I applaud it and I say, go for it. And if it's available, we need it because too, that is another step to equity for all our kids. So yay, I'm ready. Hurry up.
You got one on your team.
Yeah.
You got one.
Forget him, he don't count. He does not count. Yeah, forget him.
We go
Mr.
back to
Sharp.
this all the time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Scott? Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. But I just wanted to direct this to Ms. Bullock. So if realistically speaking, with the kids we got on the bus now, what do you think the probability of those kids, the percentage of those kids that who has Wi-Fi access or on that Wi-Fi access do homework?
They may not, but if we have one child who uses it the way it should be used, to me, that's a win.
We can have this discussion.
We can talk later.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr.
Is the Wi-Fi gonna be equitable to everybody in the county? Because the southern end, people that have supposed Wi-Fi don't.
And that's
That's right.
that was my meeting about it, and it depends on if the Wi-Fi is available in the area as well. You know, there's a bunch of providers, and Verizon might work well here, but it might not work good in the southern parts.
It doesn't.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, we've given them pucks or whatever you want to call them, and if there's no connectivity, it doesn't matter what you give them. It doesn't matter if there's Wi-Fi on the bus, it's not going to connect. So kind of what Ms. Bullock is talking about, equitable, well, it's only equitable to where there's a connectivity, to where there is connectivity. So really at the southern end of the county where me and Franklin are, it's really not equitable. So there is no equity in it.
But then we have to try to engage the carriers, Verizon, to build towers.
Oh, we've
in those
engaged.
areas.
Believe me, I've been talking to several carriers for the past 4 years. And again, they will tell you really quick, hey, it's a business. And that's it. That's all they're gonna say. They really don't care about the population. Well, they do care about the population, because if there's hardly anybody on that end, they're not coming. So place like Rocky Mount, downtown Rocky Mount, oh sure, they're gonna bring their service there. But down at that part of the county, not quite yet. Now, we're growing and we need more infrastructure down there, school. But until then, yeah, I got that. But we're getting more and more people down there, but right now the internet providers still are not bringing their access. But we're
We'll
pushing
have to
for it.
boycott Verizon.
Which, 3 of us? I mean,
Who
they're not
No,
gonna, they
I
don't
mean,
care.
us as
They're not gonna care. Verizon will tell you real quick, do what you want, we'll come when we're ready. And so they've told us that for years, yeah.
I still like the idea. It's a step forward, so we'll have to see what we can do.
Mr. Sharp,
Just a point. I think if you want to do the investment of money, you look at doing fiber optic down in the whole area to give you accessibility. That money will be wiser spent doing those fiber optic. Yes, sir. Mr. McQueen gave
Go
us.
right ahead.
That money is earmarked.
No, not your money.
No, even the money he's talking about.
No.
yeah, for
Yeah,
you,
he
right?
said it was-
What
Yeah,
I'm
for
saying
you,
is the way you negotiate, you work that through your legislation. Cause that's where it's coming
They
from.
tell you what you can spend it for.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a quorum
Oh,
when we finish that.
oh, okay. Any other questions? That was for information only. At this time, I'll adjourn the student services.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. And since a quorum has now been established for the policy committee, we will start back at the top of our agenda and proceed with the policy committee meeting.
Welcome. I call the policy committee to order. We do have a quorum. We have Mr. Dean Edwards and Miss Sharonda Bullock, and I make up the 3 of us. So welcome to each of you and to all of the other board members. First, I would like to ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the last policy meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? It's been moved and properly second that we approve the meeting minutes as presented. Is there any correction or discussion? Hearing none, I declare the meeting minutes approved as presented. The first item on our agenda this evening is the North Carolina School Boards Association Fall Policy Recommendations. And I think Mr. Weber will take care of each of those policies. So it's on you, sir.
Good evening, board members.
Good evening.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. Same to you.
Once these get pulled up, I'll start. You got a handful of substantive policy updates. These are all part of the School Board Association's fall policy update, and there will be another round coming at the end of January for presentation in the February board meeting. So I'll start with 4720. And the changes in 4720, these updates reflect the exception to the prior written consent, parent consent requirement in section A, subsection C for the CDC Youth Risk Behavior Survey and the Tobacco Survey. That might sound familiar to you because there was also that corresponding change in your parental involvement policy at the last board meeting that I think will be coming for action on Monday. So this change is just making a similar change in your student survey policy. And that's it for this one. Are there any questions?
The questions on 4720.
The next policy I'll walk through is 5210. That's your distribution and display of non-school material. So these changes are all in section A to reflect some new statutory provisions that allow farm signs to be placed on state highway right-of-ways. There was an agriculture omnibus bill that created some changes in statute that led to these changes in your policy, basically designed to promote agritourism. And a farm sign would be any sign that advertises products or animals raised on the farm, directions to a farm, and similar to political campaign signs that can be placed in rights of ways. There are some time limitations on when these can and cannot be placed and processes for removing them if they are outside of those time periods. And that's it.
Other questions? Then policy 6220.
6220, this is your operation of school nutrition services policy. It makes some changes to match changes to the name of the National School Nutrition Program to the National Child Nutrition Program. Those changes you can see throughout the policy. NCSBA caught an incorrect old version of the school district name in section B1, so they corrected that down on, I think it might be page 3, and then the substantive change is in section B2 on page 3, and this results from a change in statute that prohibits principals from imposing administrative penalties for unpaid student meal charges. So this would prevent principals from withholding student records like transcripts, or prohibiting participation in graduation or denying a diploma. It still allows the school system to seek overdue payments, but it just prevents the administrative penalties. And this is part of the budget bill, I believe.
Are there questions on policy 6220? Then policy 6401/9100.
This is your ethics and purchasing function policy, and the substantive changes add a new requirement that any employee who is involved in making or administering contracts receives conflicts of interest training. This is also a requirement that came out of the 2023 budget bill. You'll notice the revision cross-references policy 7730. There will be another change to that policy coming to you in January that also references this new requirement for conflict of interest training. And basically the statute that led to this change requires employees who are involved in making or administering contracts. They're required to get 2 hours of conflicts of interest training If they're a new employee, it has to occur within 90 days of taking and beginning the job. And for existing employees who are involved in those types of functions, the budget bill included a deadline of having the training by April 3rd of 2024. And then after that, the training has to occur in every odd numbered year. I believe the Superintendent's Association has developed some training that they make available to employees who fall under this requirement. Our office is developing a free training as well. There could be different organizations who provide it.
Are there questions?
Yes.
James?
Ma'am.
Yes.
Would it be a good idea to put those regulations in here as well, what you were talking about as far as getting the training done in a certain amount of time upon being hired or being promoted into those positions?
There will be more detail in the updates to 7730, so the board could consider putting those details here, or the NCSBA changes that are coming next month will also include some of those details. And they reference the statute, but the board could certainly include them. It could include a general reference. It's really at your discretion.
I think it'd be a good idea for your onboarding process. That way
That
you
would
have a
probably be in
checklist.
our administrative regs once. we
Right,
create
it could
a
also be
handbook,
through
it'd
an
be saying-
administrative
we would
regulation.
Reference that policy based on the regulation, will be just saying.
Okay. All right, are there other questions or comments about policy 6401/9100? If not, then 6430.
6430, purchasing requirements for equipment, materials, and supplies. There's a substantive change in E3 that expands one of the exceptions to the public bidding laws. So this expands the ability to use group purchasing programs for repair work that involves a combination of installation and equipment acquisition for heating and cooling systems. This was a change in statute, and again, it essentially expands the existing exemption.
Are there questions about policy 6430?
Ms. Brooke, could you
Yes,
just
sir.
explain that for me a little bit more in detail?
Sure. So these types of contracts would normally be required to go through formal bidding, depending on the dollar amount, right? If it's more than 30, less than 90, more than 90. Under the public bidding statutes, there are a series of exceptions to those statutes. They're not mandatory that a district or a government body use the exceptions. You can always bid. You can always seek bids on any type of procurement. But there are some exceptions, one of which is for group purchasing programs. So there are some group purchasing programs, for example, that help to consolidate a whole bunch of different potential buyers for technology purchases, for example, to get better pricing on, computers and that kind of thing. And this would kind of expand one that already exists to allow for these types of particular procurements.
So is that like a consortium?
Yeah, pretty much.
So the second question that is, do we break these contracts out based on classification of contractors? I don't know if we do that in the state of North Carolina, A, B, and C classifications. And as far as what permits or contract license that our contractors have? And I don't know if it's here or not, but sometimes in some states, when you look at Class A, you can only bid up to like $25,000 worth of. In Class B, you can go over anywhere between 25 to 75 in Class C, which is a major construction. So do we do that local or in the state?
We don't do it by class, I don't believe. We don't do the ABC, I don't think.
Right. Those classes would be classes of various contractor licenses.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, ours, in terms of the bidding rules and the purchasing requirements and the dollars, it all depends on the service or the type of equipment that's being purchased or the products. I don't believe it's tied to contractor licenses. There are some specific requirements for example, engineering contracts or architects where it's tied to you have to have a licensed engineer, a licensed architect, and it has to be bid if there are certain dollar amounts. But I'm not aware of any other specific requirements for different classes of general contractor licenses, for example.
Are there other questions on policy 6430? Then our last policy is policy number 7100, recruitment and selection of personnel.
Okay, this is your recruitment selection personnel policy. There's a change in section A that just clarifies the standard for age discrimination claims that applies to individuals who are 40 years of age or older, and also revises section D to change the time frame for mandatory required criminal history checks for childcare providers. And this stems from some changes in state statute that were intended to align with federal block grant requirements. So it actually increases the minimum period of time for criminal background checks to every 5 years. And that's at least every 5 years.
Are there questions about policy 7100? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve these 6 policies, and let me name them. Thank you, Jason. Policy 4720, surveys of students. 5210, distribution and display of non-school material. 6220, operation of school nutrition services. 6401, 9100, ethics and the purchasing function. 6430, purchasing requirements for equipment, materials, and supplies. And policy number 7100, recruitment and selection of personnel. Is there a motion that we recommend to the full board approval of these 6 policies at our regular meeting? Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded that we approve these 6 policies to recommend to the full board approval. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is there is an opening on the North Carolina Legislative Committee. There was a time when the committee at the state level was actually made up of members of the board of directors for the school board, North Carolina School Boards Association. Through the years, there have been several different changes made to this committee. This committee is actually responsible for the legislative side of the School Boards Association, and what this committee does is that it discusses the legal concerns of the districts. The committee members attend legislative sessions as needed. They have been known to even attend the Equity Summit that is held normally in Washington, D.C., where you go and you visit and lobby your representatives on Capitol Hill. It's a very interesting committee. Now it is open now for the full school board, local school board, to nominate and approve someone to serve on this board. And we have an opportunity to appoint somebody to represent our district. The person that would do this would have to be someone who's available to be able to attend the meetings whenever they're called, and also to do whatever lobbying and contacting that is necessary when we're trying to get a bill or a law passed to favor school boards. So at this time, I will open the nominations for our appointee, and I would like to nominate our chair, Dr. Washington. Does anybody else have a nominee?
I would like to nominate Bill Sharp.
We have two people. Is there any others? We have two people. I'm sorry, I'm not talking to you. I'm sorry, y'all. We have two people nominated to serve on that committee. Since Dr. Washington's name came first, I will start with Mr. Sharp, the last name that was put forth. All those in favor of Mr. Sharp, please raise your hand.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Are they willing to do that? I mean, are they aware? And I'd hate to vote someone in. I mean, that sounds like
Let you know if they're not.
a major, are they willing to?
They would let you know. They would have said it when they were
Okay,
nominated.
I just want to be clear.
I'm happy to make comments if you're able to make comments.
Yes.
So, I have no problem with representing the board, in building the legislative agenda. So I'm able to attend, there's a couple of meetings that you need to attend and help build that agenda that school boards will vote on.
Mr. Sharp, do you have any comments?
Well, I'm sort of at, sound like an interesting opportunity, what's a little bit alarming is that you bring up this position and it's not a discussion, or we don't know anything about it to this meeting. I mean, it would have been nice if we would have had this conversation and said, this is coming up. So think about this and what all the actions are required to do this, the roles and responsibility. I think to bring it up at the last minute and talk to, I don't mind working that process, because I do that now. I appreciate your nomination, Dr. Tavis, but I think that's a role that people need to be aware. I think we as a board so often jump into stuff without informing the entire board as far as what's going on with the process.
Well, the only answer that, the only answer I have to that, Mr. Sharp, is that it's on the agenda and you receive the agenda ahead of time. And had there been questions, I would have thought you would have called. And since I got no questions.
Or no calls.
And no calls, I brought it to the committee, which is where it actually belongs. But what will happen is that whatever vote the committee takes tonight will only be to recommend to the board, and then the board will have the opportunity to vote it up or down, or whoever they want to vote for at the full board meeting on the 8th. Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, ma'am. So in years past, this opportunity has been an application process on the front end. What happened to the applications?
It's not actually been.
Oh, yes, ma'am, it has, because I've applied for it several times.
I've not seen
No.
an application.
The last time this opportunity came up is when Franklin was our chair.
I know nothing about that, but I do know that.
So one of my recommendations is if people are interested ahead of time and they do have the opportunity to go, I think it would be great for us to see the applications and what kind of backgrounds they have to say that they could represent us well in that setting.
I can speak to the process, so that in transparency. So what happened was we received an email from the North Carolina School Board Association And it says that your board can nominate one individual to represent your board. And you need to do that in an open session meeting. At that point, since it involves policy, I forwarded that information to the policy board chair. And at the same time, I let her know that I had an interest in serving in that capacity. So the committee meeting is the forum for us to have the discussion, nominate who we want to represent us in that, in that role, and then recommend to the full board. So we have plenty of time for discussion, but it will be a board decision as to who represents us.
And please remember just because someone is nominated here tonight by the committee does not necessarily mean it will have enough votes at the full board. But with all that being said, Dean, Zach, Sharonda, and I are the members of the, I'm missing one. Who am I missing?
And like,
Lank. We are the only four here on the committee, and it is the committee who will decide whether we actually go forth with the vote or we wait until the full board meets. If we don't want to vote tonight for a recommendation to the full board, then we can actually do this at the regular meeting on Monday, and just ask the chair to make sure this is added to the agenda for action on Monday evening. What is the pleasure of the committee? Yes, sir.
When do we have to have this done?
Not till March, I think. So we do have time.
I think that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is it a requirement that we put somebody on it or just an opportunity?
An opportunity.
And that was why I asked the question, it went fast and I was not sure, we
Mhm.
want to be on the same page before we make the decision.
Right.
That's why I asked the question, not that I'm against anybody being nominated or whoever's interested, but
Right.
it moved a little faster than I
Right. Well, it's just an item on my agenda and it's, Mr. Lamb?
I'd like to know about how much will it cost to send somebody to Washington DC?
Washington DC is not mandatory. What this job, she stated that in the past, that's what the individual.
That's what
has
they
done.
did.
The requirements are that you attend 2 or 3 meetings to help develop the legislative agenda.
Well, I know in our policy, if somebody goes to a meeting or a conference like that, they're supposed to come back and report to the board what they learned, something that would help our school system or our students. I've been on the board quite a few times and I've only heard of one report when people went to these conferences. And I know now if you go out of state, it's got to be voted on by the full board whether you go or not. So there needs to be, some correspondence on what people go to these conferences and how it's gonna help the children of Nash County Schools.
All right, why don't we do this? Since there are so many questions and for the best interest of this board, why don't we just table this until the meeting, our regular board meeting on Monday? That will give everybody time to do whatever research they need or ask whatever questions you might have concerning this committee, so that when we meet on Monday, we can make a recommendation. Does that go along? Does that agree with you, Mr. Gray? And what about you, Ms. Bullock? All right, then we will table the item number 4 until our regular board meeting. Is there anything else to claim the attention of the policy committee? If not, then the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. It's been moved and seconded that our policy committee meeting be adjourned. Is there any further discussions or anything else to come to our attention this evening? If not, I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Bullock. The next meeting that we will proceed with will be Administrative Services and Operations Committee, Mr. Sharp.
And we do have a quorum, Ms. Phillips, we got 4 people. So, I'd like to call the Administrative Services and Operations Committee meeting to order.
Second.
I need approval for the minutes from last week. Can I get approval for the minutes from our last meeting?
Yeah, second. Approved.
It's been probably moved by Ms. Sharonda Bullock, probably, and second by Mr. Lamb. No question or discussion, all in favor say aye, please. Aye. Excellent. First item we have on the agenda is or the only item is Dr. Steve Ellis for information only. Share with us the status of the demerger process, please.
So, Mr. McQueen, can you pull that PowerPoint up? I don't have it in mind. You don't have the code. While he gets that, so we've turned in the demerger plan. You know, that was the first phase. So this second phase is basically what schools, what happens when we lose these schools, and there are a number of students that are still in Edgecombe schools that live in Nash County. And tonight, we've shared this plan with the board, probably, I think, the last small sessions, and we've talked about it. Tonight, we're going to introduce it in the committee. And if you have any questions, I think we have everyone around the room that can probably answer those questions.
So Dr. Ellis, before we proceed with that, you made your report up to the state, correct?
Correct.
That's been accepted.
So when I was at the meeting, they didn't vote on the policy. I think they just made sure that everything was turned in. So we've heard nothing else. I think the last meeting I think that was the December meeting when it was on the docket, but we haven't heard anything from DPI as to, you know, whether it passed or not. But I think the last conversation with Allison Schaefer was that they really just wanted it turned in. I think they had confidence that we had done what we needed to do, which we had some conversations with her prior to us turning that document in. So go to the first slide, the second slide. Okay. So these are going to be basically the buildings and the students that are going to be affected by this demerger. So you got to think about, you're going to be replacing TRC, and in TRC you have Ms. Grant's group, you have student services, you got mental health people in there, you have driver's ed, there are some records, support staff through academics and accountability, and also you have principal meetings. I think Ms. Wallace was telling me there might be 36 offices or 37 being used at TRC presently. Baskerville, DS Johnson, and Fairview, you can tell right here, these are the amount of students that will be coming back to us because those are Nash County residents. So just keep that in mind when we go through the slide. At Edwards, they're going to be losing around 31 students. Rocky Mountain Middle will be losing almost 100. And then you got to think about the legacy students that are at Rocky Mountain High School. And that process started a few weeks ago. Dr. Farrow and Mr. Ward had that student meeting that they conducted. Next slide.
Just a question. Go back to the previous slide. On the slide here where you talk about Edwards and Rocky Mountain Middle, they will be converging where?
We're about to go over that.
I apologize, but there's furthermore questions to that piece.
Okay, good.
All right.
All right, so here's our first building, Williford basically will be the new TRC. So what you're gonna see is the 100 wing will remain pre-K, which it is now. So that won't change. Pre-K support staff will remain. They'll be relocated to the 100 wing, so they'll be with those students. Driver's ed's office will be still there. We'll go move to Williford. EC Department Instructional Support Staff will be on the 200 wing. EC Records for District Store will be on the 300 wing. NEDA, the Everywhere Digital Academy, will remain on that 400 hall, so we won't be moving that school. The 500 wing could be our breakout sessions for principal meetings. It could be for teacher work days, things that we use for TRC right now. And also the media center will be kind of moved around a little bit so we can have our principal meetings in there.
Dr. Ellis,
Yes, sir.
you want us to hold the question till you finish?
That'll work. We can just hold.
Thank you.
So that means that Edwards Middle School will now be repurposed to a K-5 elementary school. And the reason we're choosing Edwards is mainly because we have renovated that building during COVID. I believe it was the HVAC done, new windows, ceilings. So that school is, ready to be used. Edwards will become Edwards Elementary. Like I said, enrollment would include students from Williford, students returning from Edgecombe, and that would be the count right there. You've got Baskerville, DS Johnson, Fairview, and now you're going to be adding those Williford K2 students, so you're going to have about 495 students in that one elementary school. The school holds around 900, so maintenance is going to start to utilize the area behind the gym for storage, which would be a good central location for our storage at Edwards. Ms. Mill, I'm gonna call you out on this one. The athletic piece, when we started talking about middle schools, when we start talking about Rocky Mountain Middle, those Edwards students will now be attending Rocky Mountain Middle. So what we're doing is we're pushing the Edwards kids into Rocky Mountain Middle. And a big reason for that, I shouldn't say a big reason, one of the main reasons, because Ms. Miller talked about the athletic piece that we had issues at Edwards.
They are landlocked at Edwards, and their practices and games are off.
Usually your voice carries.
We are landlocked at Edwards, and they have practices off location. They have to take a bus, and they get bus drivers. They have to take them off campus for games and for practices for many of their outdoor sports. They do have practice of football there, but they play every football game at an away location. That's the only one of our middle schools that's in that situation. And everything at Rocky Mountain Middle School would accommodate every sport, outdoors and indoors.
So that was one of the, that was also something to consider when we talked about pushing, because Rocky Mountain Middle has all those facilities already. TRA and city would still remain. Our goal is still to push city high into the community college. That'll be a discussion we have possibly next year, because that's a big wing that's not being utilized. I believe when that school was started, I think the prediction was maybe 500 students. So there was a big wing on that hall. I think presently we might have maybe 115, 120. So that's something to think about down the road. What we would like also to do to draw more students into Rocky Mountain Middle is we're going to make this the Spanish immersion site. See if I got this right. Ms. Nancy Smith, we've got Spring Hope. Hang on, which one's Middlesex? Middlesex, Bienvenue, and Winston, Inglewood. There you go. So those three schools, Spanish immersion, those students could be in the middle school Spanish immersion program, which is something will be new because we don't have a middle school Spanish immersion program. So then you have to think about after legacy students have graduated, we have to really make sure Rocky Mountain Middle has enough students so it feeds Rocky Mountain High School, because we have to make Rocky Mountain High School around 800 or 900. I'm thinking it's going to have to be 900. We'll also have some conversations about making this the pre-IB middle school to make those kids go to Rocky Mount Middle, then they could go straight into the IB program at Rocky Mount High School. If you do a Spanish immersion site, those students could also pick up a high school credit of Spanish, two credits, and then they could also go into AP or IB when we do that. All right, next slide. And the goal is to make sure we have a clean feeder system for all our 4 high schools, and this will do that. Next slide. And then we talked about this several times with the board, that Inglewood and Winston would now just revert back to K-5. Because we would have only had possibly 2 K2s, because we'd be losing. Now we would have none. And this is just that 3-5 students currently enrolled in Edgecombe will return to the elementary schools as directed by realignment. With NC State, they're going to have a Zoom meeting with senior staff next Wednesday. They're going to start showing what lines look like, because, like I said, we have to make sure this is balanced. I don't think it'll be a problem making the 2 K-5 schools, but we just have to make sure there are enough students that we can push into Rocky Mount Middle. And if you think about it, the county commissioners are always asking us how many are in the building. And if we kept Rocky Mount Middle and Edwards, you would only have 200 students at Rocky Mount Middle of a school that could hold probably, 900. So I think that's going to cure that piece for us. And I think that might be the last slide. Okay, group, if you hear me ask your name, get ready. All right, any questions?
So, Spanish immersion, Inglewood and Winstead. Is it going to stay at both of them?
I don't think it will. Go ahead.
Good evening. I haven't officially started having conversations with Ms. Wiggins yet, because this was not for public consumption, but just in thinking, we would not have the funding to support both programs. But to ensure that we're not pitting families in the community against one another, my team and I will think about a program that we can bring to both of the elementary schools that would make it appealing and attractive to the community. We just wouldn't have the staff or the funding to support dual immersion at both Inglewood and Winstead. But perhaps we could think outside of the box and think about something like pre-IB, and offer that in our elementary school as well as our middle school. And that would be appealing to some families as well.
Because what I think we have to do more than anything is create tracks for these students. We have stopped Spanish immersion in the middle. We haven't had a middle school Spanish immersion, so it drops and stops. To be able to track these kids moving, matriculate through elementary, middle, and high school, those kids would have a track once they started. Now, they don't have to stay on the track, but it would at least show the parent where you begin and where you start. And I do worry about IB because we need to get our numbers up. And I think the way to get numbers up is to track those kids as early as we can and move them in.
And for some parents, just the rigor of something like pre-IB, if I'm a parent and if I had that opportunity for my daughter when she was in elementary school, I certainly would have jumped on it. But that's appealing, and it's something that we have not done that I'm aware of since we've been in the district.
Bring you back to the statement of pitting parents against each other. I didn't quite understand.
Well,
that. What does that mean?
because Inglewood and Winstead traditionally have served the same families, K2 as well as 3-5, And it's really the same community.
Okay.
Mhm.
Um,
And we have to be careful as a school district about the unintended message that we send when we place certain programs in schools.
So going back to our history, if you could just choose one site, would you do that?
So once Dr. Ellis today shared that this would be made for public consumption, I had a conversation with Ms. Wiggins because I didn't want her to hear about this in the board meeting. So what I've said to Ms. Wiggins is that we have to make data-driven decisions. We're going to take the subjectivity out of it. I've asked that she works with Participate to give us a rubric that we can use that shows the impact that dual language has made in both schools. And then from there, we'll determine which school, of course, with the school board's approval, that we would place it in. But in all transparency, unless we receive additional funding to support the program going in it, we would not be able to have dual language in both schools. And I think to sit here and say that Inglewood is a better fit, I would be saying that without having any evidence, any data in front of me to show, because I think it's thriving in both schools.
Absolutely. And no doubt, I was just making sure because we moved students 14, 15 miles down the road from Bailey to Middlesex. Whereas in this particular case, it's
On the street.
a mile and a half.
Mhm.
So I don't see anything wrong with doing it like that if it's on the same premise as we've done it in the past.
Yeah.
So that's how come I'm wondering, why don't you just go ahead and select your school since we've already known that this was going to happen.
I think they're doing how you presenting this thing out, because she said from the beginning, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, Mr. Edwards. One school is 2 miles from the other.
Sure.
But you let the data drive what decision that you make. And that takes out all subjectivity about it. So when you go to a parent, talk to them, this is what you got information they can put on the board to show what you got.
Because
That's a good question.
I guarantee you, once the teachers, the dual language teachers at Inglewood find out about this and the dual language teachers at Winstead find out about it, they both will say to us, I want to keep it at Winstead. I want to keep it at Inglewood. And we need to make sure that we're making decisions that are grounded in evidence and not willy-nilly making decisions that are subjective.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt.
Anything else regarding dual language?
I do have a question regarding dual language and the other programs that we are talking about introducing in the elementary schools. How are we going to promote those programs so that we can have a variety of students participating in those programs? All of our students need to be challenged in those ways, whether it's pre-IB, the Spanish immersion, or whatever other programs we implement in the school district. How are we going to make sure that we are making sure that we get everybody involved in those programs? Everybody is aware of it. Everybody has the opportunity to participate and learn from those various programs.
So we can attest to the fact that Mrs. Finch is vigilant when it comes to ensuring that we share with the community the programs that we have. Ironically, just today, she shared with us that a neighboring school district had its applications already for the dual language program. So it is my goal that Ms. Wiggins and I, as well as other members of my team, will work very closely with public information to ensure that we're getting this information out to parents.
Because we've talked about the whole demerger rebrand. I know Heather Louise is not ready to talk about that yet. We're not going to unveil it. We took in a lot at cabinet today, but you're right. We've got to sell these schools now. We've got to sell these programs. And I think when we rebrand and the new Rocky Mountain Middle is gonna have the pre-IB or the Spanish immersion, we gotta just make sure we push it out there so parents understand anyone can go. It's a track, and we gotta explain the tracks and just rebrand. Same as with Edwards Elementary. We've gotta do something a little different there, so. But I think this whole rebranding process is gonna look real different when we push that out.
And Dr. Ellis, I wanna say, because you shared with us, with senior staff, that we were not to share the plan with our team. My folks back here have never heard me say anything about pre-IB in an elementary school. So I would have to work with them to do some research to make sure we have the capacity. This is Melissa being proactive, thinking off the top of my head without talking to my team. So we would have to get together, calibrate, and do some research, find some other school districts offering these things. So we'll have a good sound offering for our parents.
I think one thing we don't want to do is put the cart ahead of the horse. And I think we don't want to push you out there because you haven't talked this over with your team.
I have not.
So we're moving a little bit fast. We need to give the superintendent staff time to sort of work through that process and present to the board once they've gotten information data together. I think that's what you're looking for to do that.
Agreed.
Yes, sir. And I fully agree with what you're saying. However, you do have some parents, students, hopefully, who are watching this.
That's absolutely right.
And they're going, wait, what's happening to my program?
That's right.
You're absolutely right.
And I don't want it to look like there's no planning. So that was an opportunity for a question, so she could explain it so that people could understand where it actually is sitting. It's a communication thing.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Dr. Ellis, I do have a few questions. If nobody else has any more questions regarding.
I just would like to add, we were just talking, is that to me and to our team, we are part of the greater triangle. Nash County is. And we have to look at our school system as an economic development factor for Fisk County. We have to be competitive. We have to know what's happening. It's so funny about the Spanish immersion programs because we're doing a huge marketing research right now to how we can better market our Spanish immersion schools, the dual immersion program right now, so we can compete with the neighboring districts. We need to stop losing our children to private schools and these charter schools because this is what the parents want. We have people moving into the county. We have the ability to be able to provide that.
I think we've started that process, and this is nothing new when it comes to our school systems, because as our school goes, so goes the economic development in our community, Nash County specifically. And I think one of the things that we have done, and kudos to Dr. Ellis and his team as far as bringing our district from that low performance, because no industry wants to bring their companies here and your schools are failing. So we've tasked the first issue of bringing our low performance. We're doing that well. Now you're rebranding the system in itself. So you continue to do what you do with that. And I think you'll see, like on the southern end, we got a lot of new territories and things breaking out there. We got a lot of stuff breaking on the northern end. Where Donovan is, we got a lot of stuff in the city. There's a whole lot of activity going on. And there's a whole lot of economic development opportunities for Nash County that we need to make sure we're on that bandwagon and our kids don't get left behind there. And which gives me a great segue, Dr. Ellis, to ask you the next question. We talked about City High and working out that program into Nash Community College. Where are we with that, and what are you looking at work with those kids to bring them in?
So there was a conversation, I think, with me and Dr. Honeycutt. We've talked and shared that because it seemed like it would work better on that campus. He has a plan, but plans cost money. And I think he was trying to receive a grant this year that didn't come through. He's going to reapply for another grant. And as soon as we figure that out, we're going to try to be on that campus.
I think we need to engage more with our county commissioners partners because they understand the importance of their economic growth and development in Nash County. And I was reading an article or talking with one of our commissioners regarding that, and I think it's favorable that we're collaborating together as a single team to make sure we can do that and grow this county. I got one other question. Williford, we talked about transforming that school. We got pre-K going over there. What's the population of pre-K? You're segregating those from from all the other groups, right? So,
Well, there'll only be one group now. There'll only be pre-K at that school.
That's right.
Ms. Hargrove Jones can answer those other questions.
So currently at Williford, we have 7 pre-K classrooms, and those classrooms would remain.
population, anticipated population.
We anticipate still having those 7 classrooms there next year. This is a bid year, and we have put in our request. We requested to keep the same amount of students there. So when you think about those 7 classrooms, all of them hold 18 students.
So are we looking at entrance, regress entrance ways for that pre-K school different than the other?
Well, since we discussed this today, I have been thinking a lot about that. And that pre-K wing is right in the front of the school. So there is that main entrance that families come in that hall. So it is possible to isolate that from the rest of the population and visitors coming in and out of that building. So that is something that we're definitely looking at.
From a safety perspective, I think that we would make sure
Absolutely.
we separate the entrance from TRC and pre-K.
Yes, and there is Williford also has, and I did not think about it until today after this, there is like a second main entrance there, if you're familiar with that campus, that's right on the side. So those are just some things that we started thinking about today as ways to kind of separate that population so that we can protect our youngest learners in that building. But we are definitely on top of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else?
I have one comment.
Just
Go
one
ahead.
last question. Will there be a reduction in number of principals and APs needed with these mergers at schools?
Well, of those 4 schools that are leaving, that'll be the reduction. Now, when it comes to the principals, I wouldn't see,
For the merger of Rocky Mount and Edwards, Williford to Edwards, would there be a reduction in the number of principals needed?
I don't think so. I think, in fact, I would think that Rocky Mount Middle would gain another AP since it's, increasing numbers. And and that's the balance,
Number of principals.
number of APs.
I
That,
understand.
right,
But number of principals, would that reduce?
not that I know. Well, just the ones that are leaving.
We could possibly lose some through attrition, but, we will have fewer principals because we'll have fewer schools in our district.
Correct.
But speaking of I'm trying to understand your question. The 4 that are leaving, are you talking about the 4 schools?
No, sir. I'm talking about the
Okay.
merger of schools together.
So we're gonna be real careful when we talk about that, because just by unveiling this plan right now is gonna get people a little nervous. And please just remember, we've got a still group of Edgecombe Nash principals that we're trying to make sure we secure these contracts. We don't wanna, I don't wanna scare them anymore right now. We're trying to make sure with Ms. Wallace that we're getting everybody a position. I'm assuming, in fact, that was gonna be my comments I was gonna make. I just want the board to understand, and I think it'll have to be probably around February, March. You're gonna need to see what this budget looks like. And that's all I'm gonna tell you. Just think about losing the 1,700 kids, which talks about your comment of principals, APs, TAs, bus drivers, clerical data. I want Ms. Sanders to come in here and kind of at a 500-foot glance for you to understand what it's going to look like. Because when it comes to like, when Melissa Dancy Smith talks about programs, it's all going to be based on data. Because they're going to have to be, because we're not going to have the money to support a lot of these programs anymore. So we're going to start sharing with you some of the dollar allotments with principals, because it's going to change a whole bunch. So I'm not going to talk about principals not being here, AP's not here. I'm not going to talk about any of that yet because I can't. I'm not going to, because it's about someone's livelihood. But I think what you're going to find out, we're trying to find spots right now to fill in those gaps because, like I said, even down here, we're going to have to start combining positions because we're not going to have the funding. And we're going to really have to rely, as Mr. Sharp talks about, legislators. The county commissioners are going to have to really know this year, when you take 1,700 students out of a school system, what it really means. And it's not about students leaving, it's about money leaving. And I need you all to just be patient with us because it's just going to be different.
Do your due diligence,
Yeah.
you bring in the data. Did you have your hand up, man?
Not anymore. It's,
Thank you.
we're good.
Any other questions? If there's no further questions, I need a motion to adjourn the meeting. It's probably moved by Mrs. Thomas Bullock and second by Mr. Lamb. If there's no questions or discussions, welcome, Lee. I would like to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. The final committee that will convene is the Academic Services and Accountability Committee, Mrs. Thomas Bullock.
Good evening. So at this time, I will call the Academic Services and Accountability Committee to order. I'll take roll call. We have Mr. Bissett.
Yes.
Mr. Lamb. Mr. Gray.
Yes.
Dr. Washington.
Here.
And I am. Right, so at this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Remove. Second.
All right, it's been moved by Mr. Lamb, seconded by Mr. Gray. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, so today we have two items, two action items. First, the summer learning opportunity with Ms. Griffin, followed by field trips.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So as you remember, there is no longer a retest policy from the legislature. So DPI's workaround for that is for us to be able to provide what's called a summer testing opportunity or an additional testing opportunity. So that will be for students, targeted students in grades 4 through high school for reading and 3 through high school for math. That would also include science. And this is for students who have passed the course or the subject, but who were not proficient on the associated EOC or EOG. So it allows for those students to get some additional remediation, and then they can come back in. It has to be after the last student day and retake the assessment. The assessment counts for proficiency for the district, but there is no growth associated with the additional testing opportunity. So we have basically looked at the summer schedule, and you can see the dates here. We will remediate students throughout the school year, and then there will be an identified remediation day on May 31st. And then the EOC schedule will reading 4 through 8, science and math will be June 3 through 6. And that will be for our traditional schools, and for our cooperative innovative high schools, which you know are on a slightly different schedule, that's City and Early. Their remediation day will be May 20th, and then their additional testing opportunity will be the 21st through the 23rd. of May. Transportation will be provided. Student attendance, according to the guidance from DPI on this, it's the parent's decision. They get the final decision as to whether or not students participate, and meals will be provided. Are there questions?
Any questions?
And this has to be approved by the board.
I just have one, I guess, question. Will you give us just a glimpse into what the remediation piece will look like in a year? And I know it may not be set in stone.
Yeah, I'm gonna turn to Ms. Nancy Smith about the remediation piece. They will remediate throughout the school year based on student performance and benchmarks, how the benchmark data looks, identifying particular content areas that a student would need remediation on. And then on that identified remediation day, the teacher who will administer the assessment will remediate those students in the core content area that they'll retest in. Okay, thank you.
Are there any questions or discussion? Okay, so at this time, I will entertain a motion to approve, to go before the full board.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
So it is, motion was made by Mr. Gray and seconded by Mr. Bissett. All those in favor, those sign of aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, so it is approved. I'm sorry. Yes, it is approved to go before the full board, in the open session, so.
Thank you.
Ms. Griffin. The next item would be, field trips with Mr. White.
Good evening. So tonight we have a grand total of 7 field trips. The first 5 are combined. It's an all-district band trip to ECU campus. It includes our middle and high schools, Northern Nash, Southern Nash, Southern Nash Middle, Nash Central High, and Red Oak Middle. It's a grand total of 56 high school students and 45 middle school students, with 10 male chaperones and 20 female chaperones. So this is all in, they'll be traveling in the same day, same times. I did talk to Matthew Ray, that's kind of spearheaded this for us, Southern Nash band director. He did assure me that they would keep the middle and the high school separated, and they have a game plan for that. The next field trip is out of state, Nash Central High School, civics class. It's research history, traveling to Philadelphia on March the 15th through March the 17th with 28 students, taking the AT&T travel tours with 2 male chaperones and 3 female. The last is an overnight trip with Nash Central High School band, East Region Jazz Band. They have 2 students that could potentially place in this. They don't know for sure, but they want to get approval before because they'll be traveling in February the 16th. Parents will be going with them on this trip and traveling with them. So, any questions?
Questions or discussions? So I entertain a motion to approve the overnight field trip.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Bissett, seconded by Dr. Washington. All those in favor, vote the sign of aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so it is approved to go before the full board. So at this time, are there any other discussions or questions? So I will move to adjourn.
Thank you, Mrs. Thomas Bullock. And at this time, if there's no further business to come before this board on this evening, I declare the committee meetings adjourned.